what do you recommend for some of the parents out there for their kids who might feel alienated, or how do you get them involved in something so they feel like there's a bigger purpose?
Every parent that comes through my doors, I tell them, just be honest, even if it's a hard conversation, just be honest, and to be able to go back to your children and get feedback. Hey, how could I do that better? To truly listen to them.
So you do the same? You recommend your kids playing sports and everything? You try and keep them involved in the community like that?
Pillars of support in the community are super important. When we feel a part of something, we want to move towards that collective goal.
Welcome to Time to Head North, brought to you by TNG, Security Refined by Intelligence. I wanted to bring my buddy here, who was highly recommended by Steve, the CEO, to have you on and to talk about some school security, but you have a very experienced career, and it's very fascinating to me because you have a couple things you've done in your career that align really well with what I do currently right now. And so we'll talk about it. But I have a master's in psychology, right? But also I am a substance abuse counselor.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. So I thought it was interesting reading your bio. I was like, oh, okay, cool. And obviously my background in security and everything else. And so, well, dude, let's start with this. What drove you into the social work side of things and addiction?
Yeah. So, when I was a kid, I thought I wanted to be a police officer. I went heavy into the criminal justice side of things. And I mean, in my life, I saw a lot of despair and a lot of need for people on the other side of things. Cops are great. Police officers are awesome doing what they do, but they really don't get to the root of things, right? They're reactionary. And after I was in a motorcycle accident, I realized that I more than likely couldn't be a police officer. Had a lot of people be supportive, and they're like, hey, you could still go into it, but just missing your arm and your leg, it just wasn't really something that I wanted to do. So kind of went after social work, got my bachelor's and then my master's in social work. And just my background, what I've seen in my life and the people who've been in my life, I saw the need for substance use counselors. And, it's a big thing. Spans all, walks of life, the rich, the poor. And it's really what I love to do. Currently, I'm working in private practice, so I do have some of that on my caseload, but I do often long for just that pure substance use kind of moving forward. But, I love what I'm doing right now. I get a little bit of that. I get a little bit of everything, what I'm doing now.
That's awesome, man. I really appreciate that. I've been kind of in my career kind of trying to figure out what's the right lane. I might go towards my doctorates eventually in counseling as well and further it in that direction. But, addiction is a space that just keeps popping up in my world because a lot of veterans I deal with have a lot of addiction. And so it's been someplace like I just decided to kind of hang my hat there for a while until I kind of really understand which path I want to take. But man, I've been pretty busy with just the fact that just veterans alone, it's a big struggle for them. And so it is a demographic I focus on a lot when it comes to like wellness and everything else. And so it made sense. But, I've done school security for a few years and, I've been working with private school here locally, working on trying to, how can we implement, some kind of security setup or environment that is, conducive for the kids, but also, financially, something that they can cover, but as well as like the state, all the things that happens in that. But like for me, I keep always thinking it would be nice to have some kind of security officer that is highly trained, but that also has a background in social work or counseling, mental health, because I think wouldn't it be awesome to have that? And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the same thing.
Yeah, so I got a good friend. He's a police chief for one of the local cities around here where I live in Michigan. And he has, along with other people, set up what they call the co-response team. And in our county that we live in, also, they have something similar to that. And they use mental health professionals, LPCs, MSWs, psychologists as kind of a backing that co-response team. allows for licensed professionals in mental health to come in alongside police officers and um, with the background that they need to be able to de-escalate situations or talk to people. And one of the things that kind of stuck with me with my friend, he said that, when you come in with a badge and a gun all the time, it doesn't always make the situation better, right? That can elevate, you know, uh, uh, delusions or, psychosis or, just having a bad feeling, tensions, anxiety. And so he's like, we like to go in and make sure it's safe. And then we bring these co-responders in. And I really think that we're in a position in today's world that we can start doing something like that. I actually had this friend of mine tell me that if we have any master's level clinicians that want to be police officers, to send them his way, that he would definitely interview them. Obviously, you got to have a little bit more than just a master's in psychology or social work, but he loves that mentality, that person-centered kind of focus, and understanding the person and environment. And I have limited touch. I have some family that's military and police, law enforcement, but I have limited touch with that understanding, bridging the gap.
Yeah.
Just my understanding of what I studied in school, and then moving to social work. But to be able to collaborate with these people really does help a lot.
Yeah, the one thing I think when you talk school security, when that is always it's always the reactionary kind of version of school security, right? Like respond to the threat or someone posting on social media, then you're actively now trying to figure that out. But you know, I always thought like it would probably be the most beneficial to have someone at the school who's a social worker actively or some kind of mental health provider actively engaged with the students in a kind of a deeper format, if you will. Someone who's involved in the school and hopefully sees kind of like you know, indicators that might lead to like, hey, this kid seems to be going through something or he's showing signs. You know what I mean? Is there something in schools that are implementing that at all right now? Or is there anything that is like kind of almost like a I would say a pre I don't even know, not even an assessment, but more so like an active kind of always monitoring students kind of behaviors.
Sure. So largely social work in the school system is special education, right? And then we have our counselors that help with different assessments and things of that nature. So there's no active presence in the schools that have, I mean, that's really, faculty, teachers, vice principals, principals, but nobody that's trained in that respect. But with that too, it's the common directive. If you see something, say something.
Yeah.
Um, it's not necessarily, and this is just my opinion, but it's not necessarily the responsibility of the school to have somebody perched up, waiting to assess some danger. We
Yeah.
need to be having this conversation with our children. If something doesn't seem right, come home, tell me as a parent or tell a teacher. That's really the first line of defense there.
Yeah.
And super important because it teaches kids a lot of things. Like, first of all, we say in schools that we're trying to teach our kids to be competent adults. Being a competent adult means saying some uncomfortable stuff sometimes. Hey, I really didn't like what this person was saying. This person told me they had a plan for this. I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but I don't want anybody hurt as well. We would be directed to say the same things in a work environment as well.
Yeah. Let me ask, with kids, you have 4 kids, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. So with kids and school, sports, and all those things, for me, I've always kind of, I guess, growing up in Los Angeles, California, there was a big gang population, kind of a gang movement, and most of us who played sports tend to stay away from that environment.
Sure.
And currently these days, my kids play sports, and with my hopes of, I always push sports, hoping that it builds some kind of resiliency and some kind of camaraderie, brotherhood, and there's also like a social interaction thing with that, where
Oh yeah.
the social group that they play baseball with is probably the social group they hang out in school, so they don't feel
Sure.
alienated. Is there things like that in your work in kind of the mental health and seeing kids that you think is important for those parents to say, hey, it is important for your kids to play sports, or it's important for your kids to be in some kind of social group so that they don't feel alienated. Because I feel like a lot of the issues we have in school, and this is just me just riffing it, when you see these issues in school, these kids, these outliers who feel almost alienated from the pack, that's the ones who end up tending to be the ones who kind of, have an attack on school. And so I'm always trying to think like, what are other countermeasures we can do? And I don't know. I haven't seen a star quarterback or a highly skilled athlete be one who's partake in kind of school shootings. It always seems to be those who feel loners or feel like they're by
Sure.
themselves, or a group of those kids who kind of feel that way. Am I correct on that? Is there something you would recommend for parents to try and help and assist their kids kind of become socially integrated into the system?
Yeah. So obviously, pillars of support in the community are super important. Our parents, our friends, even further out from that, people we just know from the community. The guy on the corner store that you go and buy your M&Ms from, every week, and he just, hey, how you doing, bud? Those are all pillars of support. And what we see with that is, there's some breakdown, um, typically, or if we don't have those pillars of support, we find that people feel isolated and apart from their community and not a part of their community. And that's really important. When we feel a part of something, we want to move towards that collective goal of reaching that, just like on a football team or, a wrestling team or something like that. I'm a wrestling coach. All three of my boys wrestle, and it's just ingrained in us. But the kind of the off-label use for that stuff is community and building self-image and positivity in your life, because you can go out and get beaten out on the mat, but you still have your community behind you. Hey, you did this really well, or you know what have you, or the team with you. Hey, I missed that pass, or what have you. So
Yeah.
being able to focus on that sense of community is super important. It shows it gives us a collective goal. It allows us to share in successes and failures with other, and we know that when we go through hard things, success or failure with somebody or with a group, a cohort, it allows for us to feel that much deeper, and we feel closer to those people.
Yeah. So you do the same. You recommend your kids playing sports and everything. You try and keep them involved in the community like that.
Yeah, as a joke, if you walk by one of my kids and you're like, "Hey, what would happen if you didn't wrestle?" They would look at you candidly and say, "We don't have a place to live." Um, Wrestling is just ingrained in our family, and football and baseball and all the other sports if they want to try it. My daughter is a runner, so she runs distance for cross country, and she's like a mid-range for track, and she loves it. She's going to be amazing. And all three of my boys have potential on the mat. So,
Yeah.
and I tell parents that all the time. I'm like, first year we're not going to say anything, but give them a couple of years to develop and see where they're at. Um, Truly a sport, and it's growing for girls as well. I tried to get my daughter in this year, but she wasn't ready to wrestle.
How old is
But
she?
she's 13 years old. She's like, yeah, I think I'm going to do volleyball, Dad, which is totally fine. I love it. I love all of it. But it's a character builder. Wrestling is a character builder. It's unlike many other sports. Um, you can go out on a football field or a basketball court and say, oh, they missed a pass, or, we weren't all at our best. On the wrestling mat, you can only say, I didn't do that, or he was better than me, which is a compliment to any other wrestler. Wrestlers don't look at things like most people do. He's like, you were better than me means I got something to work for. Where, in football, it's like, oh, they were better than us, whatever. And it's a little different for me sometimes.
Yeah. I run the youth wrestling program here for the school.
Oh,
And
that's
so,
awesome.
I absolutely love wrestling. And the funny thing is that my two oldest daughters are state championship wrestlers here in the state of Utah.
That's
They were
awesome.
part, they were part of the initial push to get it sanctioned. And then when they finally sanctioned it, yeah, one of them's a 3-time state champ, one of them's a 1-time state champ. And so, yeah, I feel the same about wrestling.
Yeah, it's an awesome sport.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things where I try and tell my son and daughter, like, if you see someone who's just not like, who feels like you see them like alone often, go and engage with them, invite them into your pack, bring them on board, and like, and allow them to be a part of something that's, when they feel so alienated. I always get nervous about that. And as a dad, you can only do so much, but one thing you can do is hopefully your kids are out there kind of being a good service to the
Oh yeah.
community as well, and
Hmm.
kind of bringing those kids to feel out of place into something that gives them, I would say, a little bit of a more purpose than they probably feel,
Sure.
and it's such an important thing. And same with sports. I think it's just a value to socially get them into a group, whether they're great
Right.
at the sport or not. They still have the friends that they're willing to
Sure.
try and win for.
And to be perfectly honest, sports aren't for everybody, but they have 1,000 club. I mean, you don't need to look very far for another club, a chess club or, whatever. And I don't know, not every school has all that stuff, but, just getting together, you can make your own club a lot of times if you want something in the school. So the school systems are, that's what they're designed for. They're designed for the betterment of the children, right? So if you go to your principal or some of the faculty and say, hey, we want to get this group going, a lot of the times they'll help you make sure everything's in place to do those things.
Yeah.
Um, and
Is it
it's a pretty good thing. Yeah.
is it me, or is it like I feel like my dad saying, "Oh, their generation is different," but coaching some of the kids these days, I coach the football youth program as well. They feel like they don't take loss well, right? I feel like they don't have as much resilience as I feel like as we did as a kid. Is
Yeah.
that just
Very much.
misconception, or is it
No.
just the way society is kind of? I wouldn't say softer on them, but
Yeah.
it's different. It feels different.
Yeah. So that's really a faceted thing, in my opinion. Every community is different. I mean, you got some communities around here and their football teams are just knockdown, drag out awesome. And that's just the way that they do things. My son's football team this year went, I think they had 2 losses over the whole year. They're a phenomenal team. They mesh well together. They're athletic together. Those are parts of that. But their losses they took in stride. And a lot of kids don't do that. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One, um, greater society tells you that you should win at everything and you should be good at everything. And that's the way we should all feel. We should all be, walking around with smiles on our faces because somebody made us feel good. And there's nothing wrong with making somebody feel good daily, but also understanding that practice begets mastery. If you ever sat in my office with me for any length of time, you will hear that motto ring. Practice begets mastery. I tell people when you were a baby, you didn't stand up and just start walking. You crawled and then you walked and you fell and you tipped over things. And even today at 40 years old, a lot of people, they trip and they stumble. And so you have to practice to get good at something. Also with social media, we don't have the blowback that we did when we were kids. If I said something to your face on the schoolyard, we were dealing with it face to face right there, however that might have happened. Today's world, you have Instagram and Snapchat and Facebook, and you can pretty much say whatever you want and people can say whatever they want back to you, and the blowback's really not there. It's just it's lost in Facebook world somewhere. So we don't have the intentionality and the accountability uh, that kids had decades ago.
Yeah, no kidding. You couldn't say something online and get away with it. You get punched in the
And this is
mouth.
where a lot of this stuff stems from, with school violence and that, kids start picking, cyberbullying, whatever you want to, you know,
Yeah.
uh, call it. And, and then that person goes and they further isolates themselves and they're thinking about it. They perseverate on those issues and then they come to school and, not every kid brings a gun to school. Not every kid has intentions of doing mass harm, but they might post a picture of somebody or call somebody out in front of everybody, and that could have been handled when we're face to face and just saying, hey man, that's not cool, that hurt my feelings. I can remember a lot of times being a kid that and I was always kind of slap happy joker. um, I was always a tough guy, but I would joke too. And I remember, some of my friends like, dude, leave him alone. He's not taking it well or whatever. And in the moment in person, you're sitting there going, oh yeah, I guess I didn't realize that. I was just trying to be funny. But when you're on Facebook and you make fun of somebody, that sits, and that echoes in the room that person's in because nobody's there to, somebody might think it, but they're down 6 houses or on a different block thinking it rather than saying it in that moment.
Yeah, that's that's true. Social media has been one interesting one that I tell people like we've evolved so much to communicate through social media that we don't even know how to communicate directly anymore, and I fear that like my kids might not be able to tell me when they're having hard time, they express through social media, and being able to be a parent that actually can identify that as well. It's kind of a challenging thing, because it's just a different world. What do you recommend for some of the parents out there for their kids who might feel alienated outside of sports if they're just not a sports person? But what are some things that maybe some indicators for parents to be like, really pay attention to their kid, or how do you get them involved in something for they feel like
Sure.
there's a bigger purpose?
Yeah, every parent that comes through my doors, I tell them just be honest. Even if it's a hard conversation, just be honest. Sometimes we got to have those hard conversations. At least we're able to cover them, and then that child can sit with it. Um, the literature tells us, and moms and dads are a little bit different, right? Dads tend to be a little bit more hard nosed, and moms are a little bit more forgiving. But we need both of that. And if it's an unfortunate situation where you don't have mom and dad in the home or two parents in the home, there's ways to get around that. But the literature says that to be a good mom, to be considered a good mom, all you need to do is portray that loving mentality. And likewise, to be a good dad, or to be portrayed as a good dad, or for your kids to think you're a good dad, is you have to be able to institute change. Um, a lot of times with moms, it's guilt and shame that carries on, and likewise with dads, it's the hammer, right? It's, you don't do that, we don't do that in this house. And to be able to go back to your children and get feedback, hey, how could I do that better? To truly listen to them and to say, yeah, I think I can make a change there. Instead of yelling, I'm gonna, you know, talk to you through this. Now, I also tell my children all the time, do you remember though that I didn't yell the first 5 times? And then the sixth time I was like, hey, let's get some giddy up here. So always remembering that as a parent too, we don't want to be too easy on the kids, but we don't want to be too hard on them either. There's definitely balance in every situation. Um, I talk to my kids straight up. I go in, I talk to them about the kids they're around in school. I talk to them about drugs. I talk to them about sex. I talk to them about, and a lot of times I get eye rolls, and I look at my kids and I say, this is something that's important. I want you to be armed with this for your future. If somebody comes up to you and says, hey, take this, you're not going to just take it out of their hand and swallow something that you don't know what it is. And a lot of kids don't have that guidance because parents didn't get that guidance when they were children. And it's like, oh, they'll figure it out. They won't figure it out. If you have edicts, ethics, and morals in your home, you need to portray those to your kids. You need to discuss it with them. Doesn't mean your kids have to possess every single moral value that you do. But likewise, what we see is when high standards of morality are held up in the household, that carries on outside of the household with your children.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's there's a threshold in my household. I said, look, like, don't push me to my threshold because I'll get you.
Sure.
They all know it's there, right? But
Right.
it's like I don't put my hands on my kids at all, but I tell them, like, don't put me to a threshold where I have to really put you in check. You know what I mean? Like, I
Sure.
don't want to have to get to that point. But
Right.
there's rules, regulations in our household. Like my son currently right now, he's a little bit down on himself because he keeps getting himself into situations where he keeps getting in trouble, right? Just
Sure.
just silly things. Use a phone inappropriately, getting in trouble in school, so on and so forth. And it's stacked upon stacked upon stacked, like 3 weeks in a row. And he's starting to feel it now. I'm like, all right, let me back off a little bit and say, what's going on here? Let's recalibrate. How are we getting to this point? And he starts doing the victim game, like, I can't do this, can't do this, can't do this. And I was like, well, your grades are struggling because you're not applying yourself, because you're not focusing on school, you're focusing on your friends, you're getting in trouble in class because you're playing around with your friends. So you're snowballing this and you're turning it into the victim instead of saying, hey, I need to just make smarter actions, and it wouldn't pile up into this. Now
Sure.
he's feeling all the pressure of it, right? He's
Yeah.
struggling with his grades, so wrestling, he has to miss wrestling practice because of this. And so it's kind of this thing, and I seen him really kind of come down himself. So then I was like, all right, let's go. We put on shoes, went for a walk, and it was just my thought of like, how do I step outside of the normal dad son and let's just kind of walk. And we went for a walk, and I was showing him some of the constellations in the sky and the stars, and saying, you don't need to talk, but I'll let you know, let's not. I don't want you to kind of woe is me. I want you to just take action and start making corrections. And that's it. And it wasn't the normal dad what he would get if I had to, like, hey, get your grades up. It
Right.
was kind of a change of tone.
Mhm.
But I could tell that he was starting to feel just like, man, I can't get something right. It was like, well, that's not what I want you to take from this, right? I want you to take a different approach of like, all right, let me take one step and fix the grades first. Then the next step will be this, right? Like I always tell people, like, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? And I was just trying to get him to like see his life like this. Like it's one bite at a time. Just start fixing one thing at a time. It'll kind of, but I can tell as a parent, I could tell it felt like the weight of the world was on me. You know what I mean? And I could see it. You know what I mean? And I'm not sure if all parents pay attention enough or intuitive enough to do that. You know what I mean? Like obviously, I have career in seeing people's reactions and how they feel and emotions. So I feel like I'm a little bit more in tune than the average person. But I think right away I identify that. And I'm just hoping that there's parents that identify these swings in their kids and there's different moods and the different sleep patterns. And you're like, okay, something's up. You know what I mean? And
Right.
is that something you do as a father as well? Are you
Oh,
very,
100%. Yeah. I mean, I often, I have to tell myself this, but I often tell other parents, remember when you were a kid, it's a confusing time. That adolescent stage, you're liking girls or you're liking guys or, whatever is going on up there. And, you got sports and you got school and there's a lot of pressure coming from every angle. Be a better athlete, be a better student. Maybe you're that kid that works, every weekend or something like that. It's always that direct. Like you said, you don't always have to talk. Maybe I need to talk, or if you're willing to talk, you want to talk. Let's go down that road together. But there's a lot of pressure out there. Uh, Dr. David Burns, I usually refer to him when I'm talking about these types of situations, getting down on yourself. They call it cognitive distortions. Um, but he says, talk to yourself like you're talking to your friend. And that's what I often will tell my kids, my clients, myself. And we get down on ourselves. It's so easy today. Society helps us to know that we are less than. And I'll ask people, um, can you give me a list of the things that are wrong with you? And they'll, oh yeah, I'm short tempered, I drive too fast, and they come up with 10, 20 different things. And I said, no, list a few things that are good with you. Give me a complete list of the things that are good, about you. Oh, well, we have this propensity to not see the
yeah,
good in us.
yeah,
And I tell people all the time, I'm like, if you don't see the good in you, nobody else is going to come out. You might get a teacher somewhere or a parent that's like, hey, I see the good in you. I want this to come out. But largely, the world isn't going to work to show you how good you are. We have to work to show ourselves how good we are. And I kind of talk to my kids like that. I talk to my clients like that. Nobody's going to do it for you. Again, practice begets mastery. If you pass that mirror in the bathroom, you got to look at yourself. I literally say this to people: look at yourself and say, "I'm good looking," or "I'm beautiful," or whatever you believe. Um, that element of self cheerleading really does work, but we have to practice it. We can't do it every now and again and be like, "Oh yeah, I guess I'm kind of good sometimes about some things." We have to truly believe that we can be successful, and we will be.
yeah. I love that. Yeah, that's a great thing. I'm gonna have my son come home today and just write some positivity about himself because I kept telling him like, bro, you're doing great. What do you from my like you have these stumbles, everyone does, but look at this, look at this, look at this, and he's not seeing any of it. I'm like, okay, he's kind of in his own little crisis right now. That's fine. Let's just get out of here and just kind of change subject. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But I saw that, and it's like, I think that I have 5 kids in the house, but 3 of them are kind of the school age that are dealing with teenage kind of stuff. And I'm always thinking about how do you not identify when a kid shifts his mental a little bit, right? And so I could see out of all my kids, he's the one right now struggling, but I've also seen my 12-year-old, and that's a weird phase for him because he's coming into the age of girls and all that stuff
sure,
too. And so like I think parents have to be a little bit more intuitive with how their kids kind of shift, you know what I mean? The modes, their moods shift and also kind of be a little bit more involved. I just think you'll be able to identify more. I think those certain kids who do act out, it comes from different places, but
sure.
I don't know. I feel like you can mitigate a lot just in the household. And you know what? Some people don't have that. So I do
Right.
acknowledge it as well.
And I tell parents, I go, we have a skill called reparenting techniques, right? And I always tell parents, it's not that you're not a good parent. It's not that you don't know how to parent. It's just sometimes we look at things from a different angle. And a lot of times we get caught up in life. Yeah, I made 4 kids and I'm working and my wife's working and, we got to get to practices and we got to get dinner on the table. And it's like, I forget to say, hey man, you don't look good today. You look upset. Do you want to
Yeah.
talk about it? Or I've noticed that you're being a little crabby lately. You need some time. One of the other things that we know about you know, familial relationships is touch is very important.
Yeah.
We know that when a child's born, skin to skin with the mother is very important. It creates a bond. Um, those touching, I shake my kid's hand a lot. I hug him a lot. I kiss him on the top of the head a lot. I mean, he's 14, so he's way beyond a kiss on the cheek or something like that. But I can grab him in a headlock and, give him one on the top of the head sometimes. And I will often talk to parents and children. They're like, "Oh, we're not that family. We're not touchy feely," and that's okay. It's okay to not be like that, but the literature helps us to see that those create positive bonds, that connection. And going back to our previous statement about social media, that creates a lot more space.
Yeah.
We're not sitting with our buddies, punting, doing, I don't know if you did donut or whatever when you're a kid, and it's like somebody does something, you get to whack them in the arm. For boys, that's a crucial part of development. And to some degrees, girls too, doing different things, doing each other's nails and sitting across. I mean, there were studies that were done that show that boys feel the most connection when we do what's called shoulder to shoulder learning. You can put two guys in a room next to each other. They don't talk. They might be working on something collectively, and they're like, wow, I had a really good time with Vinny today because, we worked on all this stuff. We know girls need to face each other. We know girls need to talk and interact and do that. So as men and women, we're very different, but we still need elements of the same thing, that
Yeah.
camaraderie.
Yeah. It's interesting. You make me think a lot about my son. He likes hands on. He's, trying to get him to be involved more in the hands on thing, whether it be tinkering with his car or whatnot. Think about both my kids. I have two like high school kids, so they both are kind of very different. One's a boy, one's a girl. So those two interactions, and it's funny. Like I think from boys and men, we don't. I just hug my son, not hug my son less because we say good morning and good night, and we hug before he goes, like same thing. So it's always a hug and a kiss on the forehead or whatever before he goes to school, before he goes to sleep. That's like a constant. And then when I come home from work, I see him too as well for wrestling practice or whatnot. But like last night when he was feeling a little bit more kind of like the world's kind of taken over, I had his whole arm. Like I'm a way bigger dude than he is. So I grab him, I'm just holding him almost on the side while he's just kind of like laying there. And it's like, man, we don't do this enough. I kept thinking like, I just don't do this enough with him because he's 16 now. He's almost
Right.
my height. You know what I mean? And I want to make sure he knows like at no point are you going to be too big for this for me to just
Right.
kind of cuddle my son, like hold him close to me and just know like big dad's here,
Right.
and I think we've gotten so busy with the little ones and my daughter who just she asked for so much attention that my big son is not getting that same father
Sure.
son attack, and I think last night was a big wake call, like okay, I need to find more time, and it might be just on wrestling mat just challenging him, just
Right.
suit up and let's go, you know what I mean, and
Yeah.
don't say nothing, let's just compete with each other, and I think that's something I'm probably gonna try to implement like a Tuesday night wrestle off with me and that knucklehead. But
Yeah.
like I just those are the things I do as a dad. I calibrate each kid's kind of like how's my engagement with that kid? Are they getting enough of me? Are they getting enough? And when I do that, it's I start to see like differences, and that's how I start to react. Like, okay, I think I need to lean a little harder on that direction. And
Right.
so I don't know. I would hope that most parents do the same, or I don't know if it's just training that I do that. Is that I don't know.
I see a lot of different personalities, a lot of parenting styles and types in my office, and it's you see some that are just hands off and they don't do that. We have a motto in my household: we need all kind of people in the world. When somebody comes in complaining about something or somebody or whatever, we say we need all kind of people in the world. Without the criminals, we wouldn't need the cops. You know, stuff like that, and we develop these models because it teaches us to do these things. That's the type of dad I am. Unfortunately, my son can kick my butt now in wrestling because I only have one arm and one leg, and he's 14 and he's at that point where he's getting a lot of muscle and he's just about my size height wise. So um, up until last year, I could probably still beat him, and then last year. He had a little bit of a growth spurt. He ended up taking second in the state in wrestling, and now he just pieces me out. But I love it. I love all of it. I'll still get on the mat with him and we'll go. And, I show him the little tricks and, you know, whatever other little things. But yeah, that just represents the further evolution of what father and son relationship should be. As a baby, I'm holding you, I'm changing your diaper, I'm getting you food, that kind of, hierarchy of needs. And then when you get older, I'm teaching you how to ride a bike and hugging and kissing. And then you get older and we're wrestling on the mat together. And there's going to be one day that you give him away to, a new family. And I think that's probably going to be the hardest one for me because it's like, not that you're not in my family anymore, but you're going to start your own new family. And man, I really hope that I did a good enough job so that
Yeah,
you can be the best dad that you can be and the best husband that you can be.
man, the world is so different than when we grew up, and it's so much harder, I feel, for these kids because of social media,
Oh,
because of the way information spreads. You can make a mistake as a kid and it's forgotten in 3 weeks. You know what I mean? Nowadays, it's kind of in the memory of the digital era, so it's
oh yeah.
kind of lives on forever. Man, I really appreciate it. Just your insights and thoughts on kids. It's important, I think, for parents who are listening to this who have kids who are in school should really be really cognizant about how their kids are managing day to day and taking that moment to really kind of get an assessment through your kid and watch how they act and spend that special time with them. And as well as I think it's just so valuable because you know these school these mass shootings in school happens, and usually it's individuals who feel a lack of not just attention from home, but just a lot of things. They just feel like it's like a moment for them. And I hope that, just listen to the way you were talking about raising your kids and some of the issues I have in mind. I hope that parents can listen to this and be like, am I paying attention to my kid enough?
Right.
Am I checking on them enough? Am I kind of spending enough time with them to make them feel loved, you know, feel wanted, feel heard? And so, this is a different approach from when I speak to a law enforcement officer about school security, right? It's a different brain kind of
Oh yeah.
activation.
Hmm.
And
For
speaking
sure.
to someone in the mental health space, it's a whole different world. But I think it's great because it's the foundation before our kids get into those places of crisis that hopefully they're coming from a home where they feel loved and they feel heard, and they feel that safe space where they can kind of interact with their parents. And so those who are listening, I hope that this podcast helps in any way. I hope that you learned a little bit about yourself or just question like, am I giving my kids enough attention, or how are they doing today? So David, I really appreciate you joining us today,
Absolutely.
man.
My
I really
pleasure.
appreciate you doing it. Yeah, man, we can do it again anytime. I'd love to talk to you offline about some of the addiction stuff that I'm working on right now.
Sure.
And yeah, this was awesome, man. I appreciate you, brother. Do you
Yeah.
want to? Is there any kind of website you want to plug? Any kind of business you want to tell the audience so they can find you?
No, I mean, not right now. I'm still working on some stuff on my own, but I will be, hopefully one day opening my own practice. Just really, I don't want to say anything in a negative light, but I think that as counselors, we can do better for our clientele. And, I want to be a part of that change in the world, especially in the mental health world where, you know, um, I think it's very important to get the person that you need on your side. Literature tells us that if we like the person sitting across from us, we're more likely to get help than if we don't like the person sitting across from us. It's really big, something that I plug in my office all the time. If you need somebody else, I will help you find that person. You can tell me I'm not the right counselor, and I'll help you get the one that's right for you because I care more about your mental health than my paycheck going home. Of course, I need my paycheck, but I care about people getting the help that they need. So, but no, I think you said it. Make your kids feel heard, make your kids feel loved. That's a recipe for success. And anytime Steve wants me on here, I'll do it. I love it.
Absolutely. If you have something important you want to say or whatever, you have the platform anytime you need it.
Heck yeah, appreciate it.
Appreciate it.